Hello, everyone, and welcome to season 3 of the Just To You podcast. I'm Eric Nicole, your host, and I'm so glad you decided to join us today. Whether this is your very first time joining in on the conversation or you've been listening along since the beginning, thank you for being here. This podcast exists because of you, your stories, your courage, and your willingness to keep choosing yourself, even when it's not easy. The Just Do You podcast is a safe space for authentic, unscripted conversations that connect us, inspire us, and remind us of who we are at our core. Together, we're going to explore confidence, voice truth, and what it means to step fully into what I call the Just Do You sweet spot, that place where you are living honestly, intentionally, and unapologetically. This new season is about growth, reflection, possibility, and community. I'll be sitting down with friends, colleagues, community leaders, and influencers who are willing to share their journeys, the wins, the challenges, and everything in between. We'll laugh, we may shed a few tears, but in the end, we're going to continue to remind one another that none of us is walking this path alone. So, are you ready? Great, let's do this. Welcome to season 3 of the Just Do You podcast. I am so excited to welcome you to tonight's episode. I am thrilled to be joined by a good friend, Brittaney Latta. Hi, Brittaney.
Hi, it's so great to be here.
Thanks for joining me tonight. I'm really excited about our conversation. You and I have known each other for a little under a year, I think.
Mhm.
Feels like a long time. I felt like I knew you forever when I met you. And I'm really excited to have you on tonight. For those of you who are listening, Brittaney is a licensed psychotherapist. And I was really interested in talking with Brittaney tonight about loss and the importance of working through the stages of loss and grief and the importance of working with someone who can help guide you through those steps. For me personally, many years ago, I didn't work through some of those processes with a loss in our family, and I realize the detriment to that now. So I'm excited to have you here. Brittaney, it was interesting. In your bio, you said that you specialize in working with people who don't live by traditional social norms,
Right.
and those who experience trauma and anxiety. We're going to get into that conversation about loss in a little bit, but tell me what that means by traditional norms and a little bit of background about you.
Yeah. So traditional social norms, people that don't fit into that box, I like to describe those people as queer people, LGBT people, polyamorous people, kinky people. I've worked with people in recovery and addiction and people that were former gang members, just anyone that walks a lifestyle that isn't the stereotypical heteronormative 9 to 5 husband and wife, raising kids, going to church. So that population that really has a lot of shame to work through
Mhm.
and learning how to love themselves and all that fun stuff. I feel like I've
It's
always really created a place to make everyone feel really normal.
Yeah, it's interesting. You use the word shame, and it's interesting how that word has come up quite a bit in a lot of the conversations that I have with my LGBTQ. And I'm just finding that really interesting because we do grow up with some of that shame. And that's probably another podcast all in of its own. But did you
Yes.
always know you wanted to be a therapist? Was that something that you had aspirations to do, or did that come
I mean,
later?
I want to say like at some point when I was young, I grew up in a household with violence and alcohol abuse. And so I knew that I wanted to help kids that had gone through what I had gone through. We had DCFS come to the house several times, and I just remember them kind of like laughing in the living room with my parents and not taking everything seriously and just being
Mm,
manipulated on what was happening. And so I remember at that point being like, oh, I want to make a difference in kids' lives and like protecting kids. And then as time went on and I went to college, I just really thrived in my psychology classes. And I knew I didn't want to do research. That felt boring. I didn't want to do meds because it was like turn and burn. So I really wanted to get to know people and really help them with their struggles. And I don't know, just also have been naturally good at it. So that's how that career developed.
How old were you, if you don't mind me asking, when that was happening with DFS and all that?
I was in high school.
Okay.
So
So it's
I
your
grew up,
teenage years.
yeah, teenage years. I grew up with mom and stepdad most of the time. My dad lived in Texas and I would visit every summer. But with my mom, my stepdad definitely had anger issues. And so I became the scapegoat.
Mm-hmm.
And that started to change around 12 years old, where I was experiencing emotional abuse and like a lot of name calling, a lot of slut shaming, just stuff like that, a lot of control issues. And then when I turned 14 is when things started to get physical. And then finally at 16 is where it ended, when my mom finally left him.
Mm-hmm. I just keep using the word interesting, and I have to find another word for that. Maybe you can
No,
help
that's a
me,
good
but
word.
it's
I like to use
interesting.
that word.
Yeah. I think that's probably where I picked it up. It's interesting to me because if you look at, I talk a lot on the podcast episodes, and we tend to go back to our childhood and a lot of the
Yeah,
conversations that we have. Because let's face it, that's where this all starts, right?
that's
This
where
all
it
in
all
our
starts in
informative years.
childhood.
And the trauma that we experienced back then, whether it's abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, mental abuse, whatever type of abuse that is, loss in any form, whether it's a death of a parent or a loss of a parent or sibling, that really does shape us into this mindset. You made that decision that you wanted to help kids because of what you had experienced. And I remember saying when my parents went through the divorce, which, wasn't necessarily the June Cleaver kind of divorce. It was amicable, but I remember growing up with that sense of loss, that feeling of loss.
Yeah.
My dad wasn't around that much and had remarried, and I was always afraid of leaving my mom and going to my dad and stepmom's house because I was afraid she'd not be there. And that's a whole other,
Yeah.
again, episode and podcast. But I remember saying to myself that I wanted to, at some point, help kids also. Interesting was why I said that,
Hmm.
was understand that they're okay. It's okay. It's not about you. And I remember thinking at a very early age that I was going to be, believe it or not, a psychologist.
Well, now
And of
you're a
course, that
podcast host, which is
now I'm a
kind of
podcast.
similar.
I was going to say it's similar, but I'm taking the circuitous route. So you obviously went to college, got this
Yep.
degree,
Lots of
and
school.
did lots of schooling,
Lots of
lots of schooling.
schooling.
How many years does it usually take?
I had to get a master's degree. So a master's degree is about 2 years.
Two.
Undergrad is about four. So
Yeah.
about six and a half altogether.
And does it still come with all those hours that you have to get in clinic and all
And
that to
then
be
you
able to
have
get your licensing?
hours on top of that. So once you graduate with a master's degree, you still have to collect about 3,000 hours
Wow.
altogether to become eligible to take your licensing exam.
Okay.
So that took me about another 2 years, which is actually
Hmm.
really quick. Most people take longer to get their hours, but I was working in community mental health. I actually got a scholarship to work at this agency because it was such a high need area.
Hmm.
I don't know if you know anything about LA,
I
but I
do.
worked in Palmdale. And so a lot of Palmdale is very low socioeconomic status, and their booming industry is foster care. So they have a lot of
Wow.
need. Yeah, a lot of need. So I worked there and was very busy. So I got my hours very fast. But I saw probably some of the most intense traumas working there. I worked alongside like social workers. A lot of the kids were in foster care that I saw, kids and teens, and then working with families and like the foster families and how they adapt with
Yeah.
children. Trauma has been a part of my life since I was young. And
Hmm.
then it's followed me in my career. And I think like it makes the most sense for us to have experienced something as therapists and to then be able
Hmm.
to help people that have also experienced similar things, because we don't just have the school knowledge, we also have the personal knowledge and like how we've
Sure.
worked through it or not worked through it. And talking about like loss, like with trauma comes a lot of loss, right? Because these
Hmm.
people that you're supposed to trust, especially when you're a child, right? Child abuse, these people that you're supposed to trust are the people that abandoned you, and they inevitably hurt you in the end,
Sure.
and the effects that has on people.
Do you find that empathy plays a role in being a therapist, or is that difficult to be empathic? And is it more clinical, if that makes sense, in dealing with your patients? Because I know for me, and I guess a better way of asking the question would be something to the effect of, how do you protect your energy, your own energy, and dealing with your own kind of journey when you are faced with dealing with some trauma and loss like
Yeah.
that in someone else?
Yeah. Empathy is definitely needed. You definitely need empathy in this job. If you have a therapist that doesn't have empathy, I would be nervous. I think maybe they would be more like psychiatrists. No offense.
Let's talk
That's
about that
very
later.
clinical. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah.
Love psychiatrists though.
Me
Definitely.
too.
I
Me
take
too. But
antidepressants. They're great. But on the other hand, there has been like boundaries I've had to learn in my career and how to take care of myself, because it is really to have what we call like compassion fatigue and burnout.
mm,
And so we can be caring so much that suddenly we just get really numb and we can't really feel anymore.
mm,
And so as I've now entered the world of private practice, I've gotten to be a lot more picky and choosy with my clients. And so I know the clients that are the most triggering for me and the most draining for me, and I get to refer them out to other people
sure.
so that I can keep that energy going. So talking about loss, suicide is one of the things that I'm really good at. I
Mm,
have worked alongside a lot of clients that have struggled with suicide, have been on the edge, and I've helped them come back. But my own personal journey, I lost my brother from suicide. And since that happened, working with suicide has never been the same. My
mm,
anxiety just goes through the roof now. Not that like I can't do it, but it takes a lot more
sure.
out of me.
Sure. You're human,
Yeah.
Brittany. First and foremost, you're a human being and we're a sister, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And we're a family member. So let's talk for a second about, because I think this is something that I'm really fascinated on, because again, I've been through my own loss growing up, obviously in multiple forms. I don't
Right.
deal well with loss. I lost my grandparents. I haven't had a lot of death loss in my family. I lost all my grandparents not very
Mhm.
young at an older age, still horribly traumatic and awful, and I miss them dearly. But again, you deal with that in a little bit different way, but I didn't really deal with it a lot.
Mhm.
So when you have loss like that, why is it important to work through the process or the stages of loss and grief? And is there, this may sound like a weird question, but is there the right time to deal with that? Is it right in the moment, not necessarily that moment, but in the soon after moments of that loss, is it important to really get a handle on it, or does it matter?
I feel like that is probably a case by case basis.
Okay.
I'm an advocate for therapy always. So it's always the right time for therapy. Now, there is an idea around how much people are willing to actually dive deep. I don't know. I guess that depends on person to person. I'm gonna say it's people should always do, especially after loss.
Sure.
I'm a person that did not
Hmm.
after my brother passed, so I got to experience what it was like not dealing with it,
Hmm.
and probably as you did as well, right? There are a lot of different symptomologies that come up from it. I
Hmm.
think one thing people don't realize is that grief is also trauma, right? And that's something that people talk about very separately, that grief is grief and trauma is trauma.
Okay, talk about that because I think this is the point that I was trying to make
Yeah.
earlier on. So talk about that for a minute.
So grief, okay, let me say that one more time. So people talk about grief being grief and trauma being trauma in two different boxes.
Right.
But grief is trauma, right? So the thing that we know about trauma that's been studied is that it changes our brain, it changes our DNA. So, what is the definition of trauma, right? It's when something significant happens in your life and then it changes you afterwards,
Hmm.
right? Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Do you remember what you had for lunch? What day is today? Last Friday?
No.
And so, like with our memories, we tend to forget things that are trivial and aren't really big deal. But if I were to ask you about your grandparents passing, you probably would be able to tell me a lot of big detail. So, that is the difference between
Mm,
trauma and just something bad happened to us.
got it.
It's significant. And the different types of traumas affect us in different ways. Same thing with grief. The way someone dies and who dies affects us in different ways.
Sure.
Someone that's like your grandparents, from my understanding, grandparents are very near and dear to you.
Oh, my grandmother was one of my best friends. Absolutely. Yeah. And she passed as with complications of Alzheimer's. So that whole last
Mhm.
year, it was difficult to watch because
Yeah.
she obviously wasn't the person that we all knew. Although there were glimmering
Mhm.
moments, there were glimmering moments of her in there, in those moments and in those subtle little things that we noticed there towards the end. But yeah, she was my best friend.
Yeah. And so something like that, where it's Alzheimer's, like you are the one probably experiencing more pain than her, right?
Mhm.
Because her brain goes offline at some point, but yours doesn't. And so you see that regression,
Yeah.
and that is traumatic in itself, right? It's all a long process.
Yeah, can I share a fun little story about her though? To
Yes,
just kind of
please.
yeah, so obviously it was just gut-wrenching to lose her, right? And
Yeah.
my grandparents passed separately, obviously. My grandfather passed first and then my grandmother passed later. But my grandmother loved hummingbirds. And at her memorial, which was at the house, as an event producer, I, of course, put together the memorial. And she's the one who taught me how to do parties because she was an
Oh,
amazing,
wow.
although she couldn't cook, she was a great party thrower. She couldn't cook. She hired out, which is not what I
So
do.
that was
But
passed down genetically to you.
genetically, yes, we hire out. But so it was outdoors, and she loved hummingbirds, and she had this beautiful kitchen window, and the hummingbirds would always come out to the feeder. And during the service memorial at the house, which is out in the backyard, this hummingbird came and sat. And hummingbirds don't come and sit for very long. And this hummingbird came and sat on a branch over the table where people were getting up and talking about her. And there was a beautiful centerpiece and a picture. And we all remember talking about that hummingbird, like how interesting that was. That
Oh,
hummingbird
yeah.
came and sat the entire time. Can I tell you that that hummingbird has followed me to four different cities and four different houses? Everywhere I go, I always experience this hummingbird that comes and hovers in my window. And nobody believed me until living in Palm Springs in the desert of all places. And this hummingbird would come join me every morning. So I knew she was around
Oh,
and
yeah.
staying with me. But there was that moment when I realized that the grief and the loss that I was experiencing with her was just because I missed her presence, right? I
Hmm.
missed those moments of her and I watching Days of Our Lives together, of her and I scraping apples together, of
Yeah.
going to our house at the river. I missed the memory of her.
Yeah.
And then when I started to see the hummingbird and to experience those things, I was still sad. And I was still just gutted that she wasn't with us. But those hummingbirds made me remember the good times. And so fortunately for me, and this was just my experience, that although that loss trauma took a while to get over, now, obviously, as an adult, I look back and I remember all the good memories. So
Yeah.
I've heard it said before that that loss and that trauma is obviously about us, not about the person who's no longer with us.
I was going to actually say, like, one of my favorite reframes for grief and the pain that comes with grief is we can't have grief without love. And so
Mm,
that deep sadness that we feel is actually the depth of our love for somebody.
sure, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great. I love that because it makes it. And would you call it? You call it reframing.
Reframe. Yep.
Reframing. Do you use that
Yeah.
a lot in your therapy?
Reframing.
Hmm.
Yes. Yes. 100%. I'm a what we call like a CBT therapist. So I do a lot of work with thoughts and like the power of the mind and the power of thinking. But yeah, I don't know. I had another question I wanted to ask you
Okay.
though about that
Sure.
story.
Okay.
It's so funny that your grandma was a hummingbird because my brother also comes in forms of birds. And so our family, so my brother who passed, he was my half brother from my biological dad and my stepmom. And
Okay.
so he was who I would see every summer. So
Mm,
he was always distant from me. Um, so after his passing, that family really got together and they got to experience some things that I didn't, but they told me some of the stories from it. And so one of the things that they did is they had a medium come in And the medium shared with them that my brother was going to be communicating with them through animals and electricity. And so all of them have shared different stories of experiencing that. And they're not the only people I've heard that have said stuff like that.
Sure.
But for my family, they all see him as, what is it, a red robin?
Mm.
And I see him as a pelican.
Oh, I love it. Is
So
there
it's,
a reason that you see him as a
oh
pelican?
my gosh, yes, I can tell you the story.
Okay, tell me.
I was in Texas for the funeral and his passing, and everyone's talking to me about all these stories that they've had where they've experienced him and like experienced like his spirit. And I was having some just major bad luck that trip, just a lot of weird things that normally don't happen to you was happening to me. And I was like, okay, this is my brother messing with me. I don't know if we can curse on here.
You
This is my
can.
brother messing with me because I used to make fun of him for having GI Joes and I would call him Barbies. And it was just like, teasing who's my younger brother, or he is my younger brother. And so I was starting to get really upset. I was like, okay, he's messing with me, but I'm not really getting this like spiritual feeling that everyone's talking about. One of the last things him and I did together is we went jet skiing in the middle of winter when it was like raining on a lake. And so I did that trip, went jet skiing on the lake. And on the lake, there is this like island, this tiny little island that always has different birds that land there. And it's always like the group of the same type of bird. That trip, it was a bunch of pelicans. And so as I'm riding on my jet ski, these pelicans fly up and they just start circling around me, like
Wow.
circling. And it was a spiritual moment. It was a spiritual feeling. That night, his wife comes home and she had just gotten a tattoo and she got a tattoo of a pelican
Oh
for
my
my brother.
God. Did you
Yeah.
know she was getting a tattoo?
I think I knew she was getting a tattoo, but not what
But
she was
not the
going to
pelican.
get. Yeah. And so she told me the story about he bought her a pelican after a fight that they had one time. And so that reminds her of him.
Mhm.
And I was like, oh, that's crazy. But my question to you with that
Yeah.
is one of the theories I have, this is not like scientific research, just my own idea from experience, is what we believe after death can also be something that brings us comfort.
Mm.
And so, with that experience that you've had, what do you think happens after people die?
Such an interesting conversation because I have this thought in my head that I'll just paint the picture. I've had a lot of
Mm-hmm.
pets in my life. I've had a lot of dogs that I've loved and a lot of family dogs that have obviously passed. And the only thing that gives me a sense of comfort with Luca now and getting older is that I will see her again someday in that next life after I'm gone, et cetera, however you want to frame that and believe it. And I just believe, and for me, that in some form we will see each other again. I don't know what that is. I don't think I want to put a label on that or a descriptor on it, but I've had a couple of experiences with mediums as well, and it's been pretty jaw-dropping, right? And so I do
Mm-hmm.
believe that our loved ones are always with us. I do believe that my beloved dog from childhood, Amy, is still with me and with my beautiful Chelsea. I do believe that's what I believe. Again, I don't know what it looks like. I don't know where it is. I don't know. I just believe that we will all be together again at some point
I
in
love
our
that.
next life. Yeah. Yeah. The hummingbird's an interesting concept though, because I find them like uh, when if there's no floral flowers and there's nothing for them to eat, they're not here, right?
Right.
And living out in
Mm-hmm.
the desert, there's not a lot. It's a desert, and so I just had to laugh every morning when this hummingbird would show up at my window. Now, in retrospect, it was reflective, so I think it was looking at itself and thinking, but I made the story that it was my grandma saying good morning. But here's the funny question that I ask about it. And I sat there one morning and I thought, if they're always with us, are they watching everything we do? So
I hope they
there's
leave the room from time to time.
the room, I don't know, wherever we're at. I don't mean to make that awkward, but I thought, I'm not sure that I want that hummingbird watching everything that I do because it is my grandmother after all.
100%.
It's my grandmother.
100%.
Yeah.
Privacy is necessary.
Privacy is necessary.
Definitely.
It's interesting. I was thinking earlier before I hopped on with you, my 40th high school reunion's coming up, which I can't believe. And we lost, our class lost just an angel of a human being, my best friend from high school. And he was
Mm.
taken from us way too early, in 80s, 90s, I should say. And I remember all of us coming together, this group of friends that would hang
Wait,
out
so was this
together.
after high school? Sorry, I'm really bad
This
at math.
was, yes, I'm sorry. It was after high school. Actually, I was 24, 25 years old. So after
Okay,
college,
yeah,
even.
wow.
And he had passed and unexpectedly. And I remember all of us coming together and sharing the stories of our experience of our friend and the times that we used to have, whether it was in band or it was in drama or it was
Mhm.
in music. We even had a little after club, if you will. It was like our after school club or after football club. And when we obviously all moved on and became adults, I still remember those days and I remember him through that moment and I remember the experiences that we had together. But losing that friend in that kind of time frame was very different than losing my grandparents. And yes, their family, he was my best friend, but are there different levels of loss and grief in that? Like you said, it does depend on the person, but
Yeah.
do you
I mean,
find
yeah,
that?
I feel like 100% that goes with like the different types of trauma,
Yeah.
right? The different types of way grief can hit you and affect you. And it's really common, like the younger people are, right? It's as people age, we understand that there is going to be a time and place that they die. And we are able, if we think about the 5 stages of grief, we have shock slash
Mhm.
denial. Then the second one is depression, then anger, bartering, then acceptance. Doesn't have to go in that order and it can
Mhm.
move around all the time, but it is easier to get to acceptance when that person is older. And that
Mhm.
is, we
Mhm.
think of processing grief or processing trauma. When we can get through all the 5 stages, then we're processing in a healthy way. But when someone is really young and when they're taken suddenly and unexpectedly, we get stuck with a lot of different emotions that inhibit us from being able to get to acceptance. And so, like with your friend, with my brother, like young
Mhm.
people, a lot of our family, and I don't know about you guys, but a lot of guilt had been
Mhm.
held on to, a lot of, I could have done this, I could have done that. What if this? What if that? And then this idea of like, why, right? This unanswered why. For me, I luckily have been able to get through both of those things, but I know a lot of my family has not. A
Mhm.
lot of people don't
Still.
understand why.
Mhm.
Yeah, and they don't understand, or they feel like they could have done more, right?
Can you, because again, I'm hoping that our listeners can relate and hopefully connect in a multitude of ways through this conversation. But can you just briefly explain bargaining? Because I don't understand that. What does that mean
Yeah.
in the processes of grief and loss?
Yeah. So bargaining is the idea of trying to do whatever you can to like get that person back
Mm,
or have some kind of contact with them. This is like really, it's a lot easier to see when you're going through a breakup
sure. Sure.
because you are constantly back and forth. And so when it comes to losing somebody and someone's passed away, this can come out in a lot of different forms that you wouldn't expect.
Yeah. So true. So true. On that note, I have a question.
Yeah.
And it seems as though through some of our conversations that we've had and coffee and stuff, and just communicating that obviously working through these stages of grief is super important. Do you believe that you can complete with someone who's no longer with us if you come to that completion stage of dealing with that after they're gone? Is that something that you feel is not only possible, but it's important for you to move forward and to continue to go and to grow to complete with someone, even if they're not here or accessible? But
Yeah.
potentially you may lose contact with someone, that type of loss, and not be able to complete with them. Do you think that's important as well?
So first, I want to say I know what you mean by complete, but I don't know if other people are going to know what you mean by complete. So can you describe like what that is for you?
Sure. Saying everything that's maybe necessarily or needed to be said. Maybe there was an
Mhm.
incomplete fight or you didn't end well, and that in order to allow both of you to move on, I believe that there is a need to be complete, to say what's there, and again, even if they're not present, for yourself to say what's there, get complete on your thoughts. Maybe if there's an apology to be made, whatever
Yeah.
the case may be. That's what I mean by completion.
Yeah. In an ideal world, we would all get that experience. In an ideal world, we would all be able to say all the things we wanted to say to someone. But when it comes to a sudden death, there's so much unsaid. Um, for me personally, like when my brother passed, I remember I didn't answer his last phone call, right? Like
Mm.
him and I would text, and that was really easy to do. But I remember he called me and I was tired. I was up late the night before, and I never got to call him back, but I texted him back. And then what was it? Like about a month and a half later is when he passed away. And so there was a lot of things that I didn't get to say. And the great part about healing is it doesn't need to come from someone else's response on to help us get through or help us process emotions. It has to do with how we view this situation.
Okay, I'm going to stop you there. I want you to say that again.
Okay. Oh my gosh. From which part?
From the part of it doesn't need to be in the presence of someone else. That's the part that I want people to hear,
Yeah.
right? Because I think so many people struggle with that. I didn't get to see them face to face. I didn't get to say to them in their
Yeah.
presence. So that's what I wanted you to say again, because I want people to hear that
Okay.
from the therapist standpoint.
Yeah. So in order to be able to like process emotions and process grief or trauma, like we don't have to say it to the person. We don't
Right.
need to get a response from someone else. When someone has passed away suddenly, we won't get that opportunity. And if we lose a relationship because there was like harm and abuse, we're not going to get that from that other person either. If there's manipulation, it's not going to happen. In order to get to this point of like acceptance or completion, what you're talking about, it has to come from us. That response has to come from ourselves. And it does usually come in a reframe. So we have this idea in therapy called reprocessing,
Hmm.
right? So we process emotions one way, the way we see it, the way we view it, the way we talk about it is in one direction. But when we go to therapy, we work on reprocessing. So we learn how to see it and view it in a different way that then can help us move through our emotions and not stay stuck in one emotion. Like I'll say, when I went through the loss of my brother, I stayed in the shock phase and the anger phase for a
Sure.
really long time. And it started to come out in like panic attacks, anxiety, like phobia of driving, like just all these different things
Wow.
until I processed and reprocessed. And then I was fine. And it's been years. Like I do a ritual every time my brother's anniversary comes up, and that's actually in a couple weeks. And I write him a letter every single time. Every time I've written him a letter, it changes like what comes out.
Hmm.
And I'm always having a conversation with him, right? I
Hmm.
take a whole day to just be with him and the things that remind me of him. And this last year really is when I felt like the most acceptance. And I want to say like he passed in, it wasn't that long ago, but like 2000, but there's still been like a few years of being able to go through this roller coaster of emotion. And it's amazing that like the last time I wrote to him, I basically told him like, I get it. I understand like why you left. I hate that you left, but I understand. He was in the military like forever since he was
Hmm.
18.
Hmm.
Severe PTSD, severe bulging discs. So just
Hmm.
in so much pain, mixed that with some substance use. And yeah, I finally came to that point of being like, okay, you did what you had to do. You did what you had to do, even though I hate it.
Yeah.
But I'm not mad at you for it anymore. I'm not mad at me for it anymore, especially
Right.
being a therapist.
Right. And in a sense, and I hope I'm saying the right words, but granting him that grace.
That's a good word, like compassion.
Granting him that grace, because we don't know what everyone
Mhm.
goes through, right? And you as a
Yeah.
therapist experience this on a daily basis in your practice. You
Yeah.
get connected to what people are going through. And it's one of the reasons I wanted to have this conversation with you, because I think there's a lot of people out that are struggling with loss of many kinds, right? We've talked a lot about death, but we also talk about the loss of a friendship, the loss of a
Hmm.
relationship, of a marriage. I dealt with
Yeah.
that myself. And I started going through some interesting conversations with friends who were losing jobs and what we've all been through over the last couple of years. And so I think to be able to give ourselves a little bit of grace, but then to also know that it's really important to get together and to talk and to
Yeah.
have conversations. One of the things I talk about in my premiere episode is that it's so important to get connected and get it out of your head. My head is not always the safest place to be because it
No.
tells itself stories. So in getting
Mm-mm.
it out, there's two things I want to say, and I want to say this one first because I don't want to forget. I always believe there's a Willy Wonka golden ticket in every conversation that I have with my guests. And you said something that literally gave me the chills when you said it, or goosebumps, I should say, not
Ooh,
the
I want to
chills.
know what it is.
And
What?
you said that and I hope people will resonate with this and hear it, is that you, in order to process your grief and your loss and your trauma, you do not need to get a response from someone else. That to me is the golden ticket in this conversation because so many times, and myself included, in order to get completion, I have wanted the other person to say something or I've wanted a
Mhm.
response from them. And you may never get that. You may never hear the words that you want to hear. So
Right.
for us to move on through our own grief, our own trauma, our own
Hmm.
breakdowns, our own loss, is that we have to be able to have that space. And I believe now more so than after these last couple years that finding someone like you to talk to is so important. And I remember many years ago when I was younger, I remember sitting in a therapist psychologist or say a psychologist's office, and this psychologist kept asking me, "Why do you think you feel that way?" And I remember saying to him as a very precocious teenager, "I don't know, but I think that's what my mom's paying you for is to help me figure it out."
Tell me. I
Right?
love that that was your first experience because I love to tell people you're not going to get that from me. Every therapist is different, but I
Hmm.
like to keep it super real. If
It's just
I know something that you're not figuring
yeah.
out on your own, I'm going to assist you.
But yeah, but that's quite frankly the reason why you're there. No offense to you, but it's yes, that's why you went through to get your master's degree and your undergrad and got your
Yeah.
3,000 hours of
It's funny though, is every therapist is different, but there
right.
is an idea that is constantly taught to us while we're in grad school of you're not giving people advice. You're not giving people advice. You're a blank slate. You're not showing any emotion. You don't show your personality. There's a lot of these things that are taught to us that are not always helpful because it's taught to us from still like older generations. And as time goes on, we learn new things and no, people actually want to know about the therapist's personality and who they are as a person. And like that helps them connect, that helps them trust. And then this idea of, okay, you're not giving them advice. Like, I'm not going to tell you what to do with your life, but I do have a lot of knowledge and expertise on certain subjects. So I'm going to share that with you.
Sure. Sure. And also too, for me back then, I just really was looking for someone to tell me what I was already thinking and make that right. Does that make sense? I wanted to be right about the way that I felt about my parents' divorce. I wanted to be right about it. And it wasn't until I actually went through some kind of development work and self and personal development work that I realized that was a story I was telling myself, right? I didn't need to hear that. I was telling myself that story. So
Right.
I think having someone to talk and walk it through with is really important. And so what else I was going to
Agreed.
say was how grateful I am, and I'm going to speak on behalf of the entire LGBTQ community in San Diego and wherever, because you're now doing obviously your work online, which has opened up therapy to
Yes.
people all over the state of California. So there's a
Hmm.
benefit to being able to find you. But I just want to say thank you for being who you are. You, in my experience of you online, on your social media page, on in life, is somebody who exudes this. Not only do you exude the just do you pathway, you're helping people find that for themselves. So
Yeah.
I'm grateful to you, and I know the community as well. And
Thank
for the
you.
work that you're doing within the community. We have a lot of things to work through, and we always will. We're up against some
Well,
pretty
talk about
big
loss, right?
barrier.
We
Mhm.
as an LGBT, right, queer in gender and sexuality, we are people that experience loss and trauma all the time,
All the
right?
time.
Just because of who we are.
Hmm.
We're not even doing anything but existing, and we have to
Right.
experience it, and we have to learn how to work through it. And something I've seen a lot is like this fear of abandonment that gets created from it, right?
Sure.
When we haven't processed that trauma, we haven't built up our self esteem, right? This fear of abandonment that other people are going to leave us. So we hold on super tight to anyone that comes by. And myself included, I've done that.
Yeah. Well,
You
I
calling is a
think
thing because of some facts that have happened.
yes. And I think, again, I would love you to come back and talk about that at another episode. And I think at some point, I'd love to have you come back and talk about boundaries. We teased about that earlier, but I think that's something that's a super hot topic right now. But
Yes.
I think as far as the community is concerned, I am hopeful and I am standing in the place of empowerment that we will create a conversation that if we all just be ourselves and we be our authentic selves and we work through the things that we need to work through, whether it's with a therapist, whether it's through your guru, I don't care who you
Mm-hmm.
work it through with. I just want you to work it through so you can come out the other side being confident, having great posture, knowing that who you are makes a difference,
Mm-hmm.
knowing that who you are is a viable part or a vital part of our world.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the conversations that I'm hoping come out of the podcast. I know you and I could talk forever, but I want to say thank you for joining me tonight and just giving
Good,
us
of course.
this brief kind of glimpse into your world. I want to thank you for your honesty and your vulnerability and sharing your story.
Of
I'm very
course.
clear that people will resonate with it. How do people find you, Brittaney, if they're interested? I know there's a lot of people that are interested that just need to take that next step in finding a therapist. How do they have a conversation with you to see if it's a good fit?
Yeah, so I have a couple ways of being reached, either my website, yourtherapyrooms.com. You can always schedule a time for us to chat on there, or you can follow me on Instagram, brittany.does.therapy. And you can shoot me a DM and we can also schedule a time to chat through that.
I encourage everybody to hop on to Brittany's Instagram page. I love it's one of the first things I see in the morning when I wake up and I'm having my coffee is I go right to your page to see what you're up to. And I love that.
I've been
So
having a little bit more fun as over the last couple of months, making some fun videos.
just do you. It's tattooed on my arm. Just do you. You're living it. Thank you. I
Thank
always
you.
ask my guests one question before I close out the episode. You shared with us a little bit about going back into your past. If you could go back now to that young Brittany, that very young Brittany, what would you tell her about her life now?
About her life now. Um, I would tell her that her life now is everything she wanted it to be. Like all of the hardship, all of the dreaming, all the planning, as crazy as it sounds, and as crazy as those dreams were, like keep doing it because you're going to get there.
And you did, and you will continue to do. Brittany,
Thank
thank you
you.
for being with us tonight. I am very grateful to know you and have you as a friend. And
Ditto.
I hope you'll come back and visit us again.
Oh my gosh, yes,
Okay.
definitely.
Sounds good. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Have a great week. And remember to go out and make a connection with someone that you haven't talked to in a while and just reach out and say hey. All right, everyone. Thank you again for joining us on today's episode. I hope our conversation resonated with you like it did me, and I cannot wait to sit down with you all again next week. Remember to subscribe to the Just You podcast on your favorite platform so you can make sure not to miss a new episode, which drop every Thursday. If you like what you hear, you can easily share the podcast and episode directly with your friends. And if you would, rate us and leave us a review. We'd love to hear from you. You can also follow us on Instagram at JustDoYouPod. As you go out back into the world today, remember to just do you. All right, talk next week.